The Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, started in 2013. It was introduced by Chinese President Xi Jinping as a way to enhance global trade and stimulate economic growth across Asia and beyond. It's a big project from the Chinese government, aiming to create a vast network of trade routes that connect China with the rest of the world. Its goal? To change the world's economy by building infrastructure that supports trade and investment. The BRI is a huge plan for roads, railways, ports and other building projects. These projects are designed to improve connectivity and facilitate smoother trade routes. It aims to connect China better with Asia, Europe, Africa and other places. By doing so, it hopes to create new economic corridors and boost regional development. This initiative promises to increase trade, help economies grow, and build stronger relationships between countries. It is seen as a way to foster international cooperation and mutual benefit. But there are worries about what might happen, especially for developing countries in Africa. Some fear that these countries might become too dependent on Chinese investments. The BRI is a new way China is working with the world, using its economic power to reach its goals. It represents a shift in global economic dynamics, with China taking a more prominent role. Some people say it will be good for building things and helping economies. They believe that the new infrastructure will lead to long-term economic benefits and improved living standards. Others worry about countries owing too much money to China and China having too much power. They fear that the debt incurred by these projects could lead to financial instability and loss of sovereignty. This video looks closely at the BRI in Africa, talking about the good and bad things that might happen. We will explore the potential benefits and the challenges that come with this ambitious initiative. Over the last 20 years, China's presence in Africa has grown a lot. What started as a modest engagement has now transformed into a significant partnership that spans multiple sectors and industries. China isn't just taking resources anymore. It's deeply involved in the economic and social fabric of many African nations, contributing to their development in various ways. It wants to be a main partner in helping Africa develop. This includes not only infrastructure projects, but also technology transfer, education and healthcare initiatives. It's offering loans, investments and aid like never before. These financial commitments are aimed at fostering long-term relationships and mutual growth. We can see this most clearly through the BRI, which has paid for many building projects across Africa. The Belt and Road Initiative is a cornerstone of China's strategy to enhance global trade routes and economic ties. From roads and railways to ports and power plants, Chinese money is changing how Africa looks. These projects are not just about construction, they are about creating a new economic landscape. This growing relationship got even stronger at a big meeting in September 2024. Leaders from both sides discussed future plans and solidified their commitments. At this meeting, China promised a huge $51 billion in loans, investments and aid to African countries over the next 3 years. This is one of the largest financial commitments China has ever made to Africa. China also promised to create 1 million jobs for Africans, showing how much influence and ambition China has in Africa. These jobs span various sectors, from manufacturing to services, aiming to boost local economies. However, some people worry that African countries might borrow too much money from China and rely on it too much. Critics argue that this could lead to a debt trap, where countries are unable to repay their loans and become economically dependent on China. Chinese investments help build important things, but they are expensive. These projects, often part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, aim to improve infrastructure in developing countries. However, the high costs associated with these projects can lead to significant financial burdens for the host nations. Many African countries owe a lot of money, and a large part of that debt is to China. This debt is often incurred through loans for large-scale infrastructure projects, which are intended to spur economic growth and development. However, the repayment terms can be stringent and challenging for these countries to meet. This debt, often from loans for BRI projects, can be a big problem for countries. The financial strain can limit their ability to invest in other critical areas. The high interest rates and short repayment periods can exacerbate the financial difficulties faced by these nations. It can mean less money for important things like healthcare and schools. When a significant portion of a country's budget is allocated to debt repayment, there is less available for essential services. This can lead to underfunded education systems, inadequate healthcare facilities, and a general decline in the quality of life for the population. Zambia is a good example of what can go wrong if a country borrows too much. The nation has faced severe economic challenges due to its high levels of debt. The financial strain has impacted its ability to provide services and maintain infrastructure. In 2020, Zambia was the first African country during COVID-19 to fail to pay back its debt. The pandemic exacerbated existing financial issues, making it even more difficult for the country to meet its debt obligations. This failure to repay had significant repercussions for its economy and its people. It missed a payment of $42.5 million. This missed payment highlighted the severity of Zambia's financial crisis and underscored the challenges faced by heavily indebted nations. This financial trouble happened partly because Zambia owed so much money to China, mostly for BRI projects. The reliance on Chinese loans for development projects created a cycle of debt that became increasingly difficult to manage. Zambia's situation is a warning. It serves as a cautionary tale for other nations considering similar financial arrangements. The risks associated with high levels of debt can have long-lasting impacts on a country's economy and its people. It shows how important it is to be careful about borrowing money and managing debt. Countries must weigh the benefits of infrastructure development against the potential financial risks. Effective debt management and prudent borrowing practices are essential to ensure sustainable economic growth and stability. Owing a lot of money creates another big problem for African countries. They might lose control of important assets. When countries can't pay back their debts, lenders might take assets as payment. While nothing in Africa has happened, like what happened with Sri Lanka's Hambantota port and China, people are still worried. China is becoming more powerful in the world. As its economy and influence grow, it's more willing to use its power to get what it wants. This makes people wonder if African countries, which sometimes have weak governments, can really stand up to China and protect their interests. News stories and politicians in the West often talk about China using debt trap diplomacy. This idea is that China purposely makes developing countries borrow too much money so it can control them. But this is too simple. It doesn't consider the choices African governments make and the other reasons why Africa has debt problems. China isn't the only lender to African countries. In fact, China holds less than 20% of Africa's total debt. Most of the debt is owed to international organizations and private lenders. Also, this idea doesn't consider the problems already existing in Africa, like relying too much on selling natural resources and weak governments. These problems make it harder for countries to manage debt. African countries aren't just taking money from China without thinking. They can decide how much to borrow and make sure the investments help their people. African countries need stronger organizations and more skilled people to manage debt well. If they know more about debt and negotiating contracts, African governments can make better decisions about Chinese investments and get better deals. It's important to have a more balanced and realistic view of China's role in Africa. We need to stop using dramatic stories and instead understand the good and bad things about Chinese investment. Responsible lending and borrowing are very important. China needs to lend money responsibly and be open about it. Projects should make sense economically and help the countries in the long run. African governments need to be careful with how they spend money, choose projects that help their people, and get better at managing debt. China's Belt and Road Initiative has both good and bad possibilities for Africa. Building new things and growing the economy are good, but there are worries about debt, transparency and losing control. Dealing with this complicated situation requires a careful and practical approach. It's important to understand that African countries have choices and that everyone involved needs to act responsibly. By talking to each other, being open and focusing on sustainable development, China and Africa can work together to build a better future for everyone.